I thought perhaps we'd wrap up this week. How would you like this? Some interesting facts. I guess it's my opinion. Some interesting facts regarding the factual world. How about this? How about first consider the plasticity of facts? We was already sort of talking about this a few nights ago. But consider that while the tangible, the actual world, as opposed to the factual world, that while the tangible world that the facts represent may be inalterable, such as if you pick up two rocks, I'll talk real fast because you got to trust me on this. If you pick up two rocks and you place it next to two more rocks, you've got whatever number of rocks is there. But factually, you could take man's mathematics, since he factually invented it, and you can, as you damn well know, you can make 2 plus 2. Man could, not just you or some unilateral nut, but humanity could decide that 2 and 2 was 5. But, now of course we've ruined me even saying 2 rocks close to 2 rocks, because I'm using the established, the accepted factual world already, that we all know that 2 would be, if we had a rock in one hand and a rock in this hand, and we put it down, everybody would say, well, that's 2 rocks. And then you did the same thing, and say that's 4. So I'm using their terms to start with. So whatever it is, you would have those same, even if you change the factual world, which is only made, it only grows from the actual world, remember. Facts only grow from acts, nowhere else. There is no ground. They cannot have some form of hydroponics and grow facts out of nothing. I mean, they're vague enough already. But you cannot grow facts out of thin air. They have to come from acts. And so you have mathematics. And then this is no problem for anybody to see, and it's nothing tricky, is all facts represent something, or all words, if you want to start off real easy. All right, that's long enough, now go to the hard stuff. But all words represent some reality. Whether it actually be tangible or not, but it represents something that people say is either tangible and physical or experiential, possibly experiential, that it is real in some way, it is actual. So you would have the rocks, and to now push it a little bit, we can't say anymore that we've got 4 rocks. We've got whatever damn rocks we got them there. They're still there, right? The ones you remember that earlier I did. All right, those rocks are still there, but humanity, the factual world of man could change. No problem, to where that is no longer, it could be. But you understand, that does not change that, but that in no way confines the factual world to what it is now. That all you got to do is push your brain a little bit if you got any possibility of doing this. You got to go past worrying about whether it's a game or not. But notice that your brain recoils absolutely to say, all right, if we pick up a rock in each hand and put it there, and then we get a rock in each hand, we put them there. And then to say, well, wait a minute. Humanity could, for whatever reason, they invented mathematics. Humans invented mathematics. Humans can stop mathematics. No, that's something else. I mixed up my public service announcement. I'm sorry. We can say that humanity, since they invented mathematics, they're not acts, they are facts. But notice how your brain immediately recoils, that if I said, well, humanity could change it and say that those 2 handfuls of rocks that we put over there are now 5 rocks. Not only that case, but from now on, anytime you got this and this, of anything, oranges, accountants, you put them together, you got 5. Either that or a riot. What I want you to see is, well, the little side was that your brain recoils like, well, that's not true. Well, sure it's true. I mean, it's not true right now, but humanity could decide, since they invented mathematics, since it is a factual, part of the factual world, not the actual world. The rocks would be the actual world. And whatever those rocks are, that's the actual world. And if there's a bunch of people attacking you, and you're back then at the actual level, and you had let's say that you got no factual world, but you had this many people coming, the Montagues from over the hill, and they do not look real neighborly. And you realize I'm going to have to defend myself, and here comes, and you look over there and you've only got, you remember those, you had one in each hand, you put it over here and you got, that's all you've got. Then actually, you are in a world of trouble. It's not going to work. No matter whether we call it that many rocks or that many rocks. You understand? It simply is that. But it does not have to be called that. They are two different things. You get to the point, if you can see it, not playing with words, philosophy and all sorts of things have run around the edge of this for years, I know. So I hope none of you have any kind of drug-induced, or worse than that, State University-induced flashbacks to where you suddenly have some passing sensation of gas. I mean, philosophy 101, undergraduate, forget all that. It is simply I want you to see that there is a difference. There is a placidity to facts that the mind itself does not normally take into consideration. It's not supposed to, because it would then what? It would then have an adverse, from an ordinary view, effect upon what seems to be that kind of at least apparent certainty that the mind can provide in these unstable times. Which times are those? All time. I thought you meant contemporary times. All right, those two. But at any rate, if the mind, if it says 2 and 2 is 4, the point being right quick, everybody needs to depend on that. You have got to depend on that to live in the ordinary factual world, in a sane, middle-class, expected, profitable condition. And you cannot just simply turn around or cross a state line and go from, say, from Arkansas to being depressed. To Oklahoma. And suddenly go over in the great Sooner State, and you find out over there that 2 and 2 equals. You can't do that. That is not the nature of the factual world. But, as always, simultaneously on the other side of the coin, you have the fact that from one view, at least in your lifetime, for all intents and purposes, for all operational intents and purposes, the actual world is immutable. It just, in your lifetime, whatever happens, unless, as I said, those kind of anomalies of earthquakes and plagues, and other than that, you look upon the actual world, if you begin to be able to use this kind of map for your own peephole purposes, is unalterable in your lifetime. It's just a losing battle. It's unprofitable to try and make some change in the actual world in the same way of that you do not fit into the sane definition of ordinary life if you tried to spend your life learning how to fly. Now, I don't care how many gurus or drugs that you take. Well, I hate to be disappointing. That is not, any of you that taking drugs or meditating, if you want to fly, don't blame me. But the rest of you know damn well if you jump out a window where you're going. You may dream of going to the heavens, and if you believe in the kind of good old Calvinistic heaven, then I guess you will end up there with Bird and Elvis. But you're not going to fly. So, what can be apparently altered in a life? The factual world. And I was going to say that it's like an unruly finding as opposed to a workaday conclusion, because we've already badmouthed conclusions to such a point that I do not have the nerve to make use of that word anymore. So let's call it, that's rather than just, we've used subversive theorem. Unruly finding, is that you could say that acts and facts have their own separate reality. They could even be labeled, if you want to go a little further, you could even label them relative, of course, and metaphorical. But you could label it like hard and soft reality. And I point that out for a reason. How about number 2 interesting fact? That facts can sound more exciting than they are. Facts can and often do sound much more exciting, meaningful, enjoyable than they prove to be. For instance, where can we start? Well, how about the great old operatic attempt at one time? The Spagensang. If any of you have ever been privileged enough to, that was, well, Berg, he blamed it on Mahler. The idea, it was a combination. There'd been several operas. You notice how the blankness here of how many of you not only have seen the operas or heard them, but even heard the word. But it was an attempt. Now listen, at first, now let's don't laugh yet. Don't be sarcastic. The attempt was, I think Mahler's given credit, but at any rate, was the idea that instead of just singing, since opera, real opera as opposed to operettas, light opera, has no actual dialogue, whatever is, quote, said is sung from the time the curtain goes up to the time the curtain goes down. So the Spagensang was an attempt that it was a cross between speaking and singing, but the key to it now, because you could say, well, all right, well, yeah. The key to it was there could not be any perfect intonation, any perfect pitch in there, because as soon as you did, it's singing. So now imagine, let's assume all of you don't have to know anything about music. I could pick the art, cubism and all, but this is something, because if you think about it first, you don't have to like opera or anything, but assume that they have a story. Boy finds a girl, and boy loses a girl. A regular story, and they're going to sing it, and you've already had Rossini and Verdi, and everybody's been writing operas, and so this guy comes along. He's all artists. That's part of their job, is to get unruly, to get out of line. And so Mahler, or whoever was the first, thought, well, wouldn't it be great? Some kind of combination, because instead of just singing, because people do not sing in life, in some way, I don't know his thought processes. I'm just making this up to get you to see the point. That in a way, it sounds like, at first, a splendid idea. That rather than just have people, you don't even have to be offended by opera as it is. But you think, well, something new. Because to be an artist, you've got to come up with something new. I mean, to be a real artist, you're going to be famous. You can't keep quoting everybody else. You've got to get out of line. And, of course, the real trick, and what you hope for, is to get out of line in such a way that those in line go, wow! That's even neater than us being in line. As opposed to what normally happens is people look around and think, God, what a nut. That kind of thing. Which is why there's always so many employment opportunities open in the world of art. But at any rate, so let's assume that Mahler or whoever, he thinks, right, we've got opera down, but people do not actually sing out in life. But if I tried to take that away, and I wrote an opera, and I called it something else, like Mahlerism, tried to come up with something new, and I take away people actually singing, what have I got? And let's assume the man was not an ordinary dunderhead. He'd go, I believe that they got that. They call it plays, don't they? And you think, well, Jesus. But then, what is the mind? What is 3D reality fueled up to do with polarized energy? All right, we've already got drama that people come out and talk, blah, 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 blah. And then we've got opera. People come out and they don't talk, but their conversation goes by singing, which nobody does. So what could I do? What if, instead of just talking, I in some way could get between the two? That it wouldn't actually be talking, that it would be musical. You have music in the background, but the people are not engaged in dialogue, in rhetoric, but it is somewhere this side of actual singing. And if I remember the definition, the way that Berg or whoever it was tried to describe, it's not singing and it's not talking. It's a combination, except the key is you cannot have true pitch going on. Any kind of intonation, that is, you cannot actually be singing a note. Because as soon as you do that, your ear, as it's going to automatically do, is going to hear singing. To make it easy, and I'm not being a music critic, I'm just using this. Like I said, we can just trust me. I'll come up with more. But this was just if you can follow it, struck me as being a great one, because you'd think, well, Jesus, that would be something. Because in a sense, it's artificial opera. It may be musically interesting, but you could say, well, it is kind of artificial because people do not sing to each other. And there it is. If you had a score and your libretto and your people are singing, it's not even in rhyme, but they're actually singing dialogue. And you can say, well, that is pretentious. That's artificial. But hey, what a great idea is some way you get a combination. It'd be better than just a play. It'd be better than just people talking. Because you could take a play, you could take Shakespeare, if you had any musical ability, and do what they attempted to do, turn it into the Sprachgesang, and actually take Shakespeare, but not put it to music, but put it in this area that this guy's thinking about, to where he's not actually talking anymore, the characters, but they're not singing. It's a combination, but you've got to keep them from actually ever locating the voice in a perfect intonation. That is, make it simple. I can do that. That now, if it's Romeo, you take it somebody's dialogue, and you put it to music, but instead of putting it to actual music, we're using the pianos. Instead of playing on the white and black notes, you have got to constantly sing somewhere in the crack. And that's not really the perfect definition, but you understand, you can actually start hitting a true note, or else your ear immediately goes, wait a minute, this is opera. The point is, at least theoretically, and if you just sit there and first heard this, perhaps some of you may fall for this and go try to buy a CD of it. If you hear it, you might think, that's a good idea. But notice, friends, the first one of those, Wozak or whatever it was written 30 or 40 years ago. And how often do you hear it performed? Have any of you ever heard of it? It's out there. You can find it on records if you look. And if you sit and listen to it, I was just going to suggest that it might be one of those ideas, one of those facts. Now, remember, this is a fact. Now, people singing, you can say it's an act, but the fact of this Sprachgesang was a fact, and it sounds better. I just suggest. I could be wrong. And it's not just me, by the way. I was pointing out that it's hardly ever performed. You do not find it on the hit parade. Symphonies and opera companies are not fighting one another to get out the latest version of it. It sounded, the fact sounded better than the act. Master, I could think of others. How fast can we talk? How much do you want to hear? Remember, facts can change. Facts can adapt. Facts must change the factual world. And facts can sound better than they turn out to be. Put a serious comma there. I was going to give you some more examples to try and push you to thinking about this, but that is not even the end of that fact about facts. But they can sound more interesting than they are. And besides the Sprachgesang, show you how rare it is. Not that I'm the most sophisticated person in the world. I've never even heard the name pronounced. So in case any of you have actually ever heard it pronounced, don't bother to write me and tell me I didn't pronounce it right. That's how popular it is. I've never even heard anybody say it. But at any rate. How about other things? Ideas, and it's not an attack on the ideas now. Perhaps these won't sound as exotic if any of you thought that was reaching for an example. You don't have to reach. How about state mental health departments? How about knowledge is power? Or that seems too direct. How about a little more extended idea that nowadays is very popular. It's always had a certain currency and value, but now whatever you do, get an education, because they can't take that away from you. I mean, yeah, this sounds great. But could I suggest, again, to remind you where we are on this second fact about the factual world, it sounds, when I say better, it's not some quality judgment I'm trying to make. It just sounds better. It sounds more meaningful. It sounds more useful. It sounds more complex. It sounds more insightful. It sounds better than it may actually be. How about criminal rehabilitation? The war on poverty. That was popular several decades ago. Here's a good one. It's pretty current, a little more up to date. Preventive health maintenance. That's very popular nowadays. Now that the AMA and things have loosened up, that hospitals, in case you haven't noticed, are advertising. Well, I'm sorry, giving public service announcements. Preventive health maintenance. It sounds wonderful. Keep yourself from getting sick. I mean, it's a new breakthrough. It's a new fact. It's a new theory. It's a new approach. Right? Now think about it. Without being sarcastic, which I'll assume that you people can do by now. Huh. But think, you do know that term is new. That is a new factual term, at least in your lifetime. Preventive health maintenance. And they can immediately point out, well, do you wait? Don't you go have your oil changed? If you got a little spare time, won't you pull in a service station and say, take a look at my transmission? Or, I don't know, I got some free time here while you're putting on new tires. Drain out my power steering fluid and change it. I mean, you do that. We look after our cars and try and prevent major problems arising that will cost us more. And yet, sad to say, we will not do the same for our own bodies. That sounds great. Unless you think, does that mean that humanity, up until the last 10 years, that people just, at least unconsciously, I guess they would make us say, just probably wanted to get sick? That this is now a new fact. It is a new part of the factual world. Preventive health maintenance. I'll leave it to you, but do you see, one more time with no sarcasm, there's nothing wrong because I'm going to get you to try to see even a little broader. But the idea, the fact, sounds better than the actual act would merit. Still, facts that may sound better than the acts. How about the whole idea of fame, since Kyruk mentioned that tonight? I mean, first you hear about fame. The whole thing, being a famous big shot, was the way Kyruk put it tonight, if you recall. But one guy pointed out that he thought the best thing about being a famous big shot is everybody else thinks you're having more fun than you actually are. Because if you were given the possibility, if you were just an ordinary person, if you were thinking ordinary level, and somebody said, at no expense to you, would you like to be famous right now? Every sane person would go, okay, no cost now, no cost. Sure, I'll take it. And you wouldn't take anything unless you thought would be a benefit. Assuming that you're just ordinarily sane. I don't know how many of you have ever been a famous big shot. But would you at least look into the depths of your own DNA and at least get a hint right quick that being a famous big shot, think of the biggest famous big shot at the ordinary level that you think of. Boy, how it must be to be blank. Whoever. Madonna. Boy, what if I was all five or whatever it is of the new kids on the block? Or if I was Mick Jagger. But then if you think, I'll assume but now that some way that you are insightful enough that you understand the kind of dreams you had of reading teenage fan magazines, that we'll assume that now you're a little more sophisticated, not just through experience, but through your own nervous system's insight, that you would suspect that being famous, that a famous person may not necessarily be almost uncontrollably happy every waking moment, 7 days a week. But it sounds wonderful. If you just hear, would you like to be famous? You got 5 seconds right quick. Do you want to be famous or not? I got to go. Well, yeah, sure. And of course, probably the ultimate, I don't see I need to do any more examples of facts that sound, that sound just, but they sound better than they actually turn out to be. I guess the ultimate is probably religion. Or psychology, take your choice. But religion, well, I don't know. Maybe the idea of going to Kansas City, that could be, well, no, back to religion. Think about, assuming that you can withhold any ordinary critique, hostility that you may have toward religion or psychology, which is meaningless. That is, your criticism. Not religion and psychology, but your criticism. But consider how great it sounds if you can think in some new area in your brain where it is not being routinely critical. To just think, just the idea, it doesn't matter what religion, just the idea, the fact of religion. Facts don't come much better than that. And then without going into any sort of negative analysis of the history of religion, just realize from your own life, you don't have to look back at all the misdeeds that history says that religions have done. But religion just does not, along with, I was suggesting, everything from some of the works of the German modernist composers to Freud and Muhammad and other people, that all sorts of ideas, including religion, God, almost take your breath away. But then if you look from a certain view, the idea, to say the least, which I think I did, but to say the least, the idea sure sounds a lot better. The fact of it sure sounds a lot better than the act turned out to be. Now, I told you put a comma there. Would any of you suspect that part of the job of facts is to sound better? Well, consider this. Now, all of you can see, using the kind of descriptions that we have done of mapping out the world into the factual and the actual world, that while the factual world can change, while as offensive as it seems to sequential logic, that we could make those rocks and then those rocks not any longer be this, but be this. As obscene as that is to logic, you do, I'll assume, realize, after having pestered and pounded you for the last 15 minutes, that now you see, yes, that could be true. While that may be true, you do see, withal, the actual world is just what it is. You do see that no matter if the factual world, which man could do, not you, but man, life could make man say that, all right, that many rocks plus that many more rocks equals Knoxville. It equals 72 degrees. It equals a double hernia, or 5. It could say anything it wants to, literally. You've got to see that. It's not going to happen. But it could. It does not affect. You could make up mathematics out of colors, out of smells. You could do anything you want to. But those rocks, and then those, there they are. We can decide that 2 and 2, 2 rocks and 2 rocks equals a planned economy. It equals a wobbly orbit. It equals a clarinet full of zinc. You can say anything you want to, but please note, those rocks are what they were before we changed it from it being 4 rocks to now being, we now have a clarinet full of zinc, which we could say, well, that's a little more exciting. At least it's different than saying 4. A clarinet full of zinc. I mean, it has a, I'm just being silly, of course. Really? All right. You can say, well, that has a certain newness or freshness, a verveness. But notice, those poor sucker rocks are just what they were. That is the world of acts. You can begin to call sex all sorts of things. You can begin to call eating all sorts of things. You can put French names. You can say, well, that man is an eater. You can say, no, the man is a gourmet. And it has. You think, well, hey, that's a little more interesting. But the man is still whatever he was, right? He's still 4 rocks. He's still chowing down. But now the man is not an eater. The man is a gourmet. All right, the point I want you to try and see is you could look at part of the responsibility of facts is to make up for acts' dullness and placidity. Think about it. And we were hinting at this last time we were meeting. And it can't be proven, and there's no way to back up logically. You either got to feel this, but if you could be what you are now, if you're an ordinary person, and something else, that if we could let you retain your factual senses, your factual awareness of everything that you've experienced and know, blah, 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 and still throw you back into a world sans facts, that you are back to the feral, unsophisticated, uncivilized world of acts, you would go, what's the technical term? Nuts! Wouldn't you? I mean, as wonderful as eating can be when you're hungry, as wonderful as getting laid is when you're in the rutting season. Think about now. Think about now, and not you personally, but you being fairly indicative of contemporary intellectual, factual people. Nowadays, if you took away the factual aspects of the most basic endeavors of humanity and activities, would you not be losing a little something? Would it not be a little less interesting? Now, if any of you are really good, you might have somewhere in your nervous system by now that might go, that may be true, but I'm not sure I approve of it myself. So I've been trying to fight that. Well, you can try to fight it, but you're not getting anywhere. You just got to be able to move the activity of your brain to a new level, into an area not used, because you can't go back and fight and say, well, that's right, such as sex. That yes, when I have sex, I too often daydream about somebody else. Daydream that whatever. And you can say, well, I don't really approve of that, because if I am actually having sex with this person, that's what I should be doing. And it's not just sex. I'm picking out the easy one that will get everybody. And you can say, well, I shouldn't do that. A person attempting to think in a new way, somewhere way back in kindergarten, it's all unusual for them to go through that and think, well, something's wrong with that. I should stop that. You can try to stop it. It's not even the point of trying to stop whether it's right or wrong. What I want you to see is, notice it is natural. That once your mind begins to think, it is not that in some way that you got traumatized sexually so that you cannot fall into bed with somebody of the appropriate sex and just actually go to it with them, that half the time you're doing it, you're daydreaming about a 49 Dodge with Madonna tied up in the trunk. And you can say, well, something's wrong. I should just be able to enjoy just sex. I should just be able to, get down and screw and not be doing that. All right, let's say many people say that. Notice this, though. It is not something that is singular to you. It is not a dysfunction. Just trust me. Everybody can think daydreams, I'm just using coordinated terms, at some time when they're screwing about something else or somebody else. Here's what you have. Then in the factual world, what could we call that other than, let's see. How about natural? And forget about anything that's weird enough to get outside the middle class of whatever locale you are. And when I say that kind of daydream is not dysfunctional, I'm not counting in, I shouldn't back up this because we're not here to preach to the ill, that if the only way that you can get sexually aroused is by actually tying yourself up and getting in a trunk and doing something, I don't know. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about that which many people would say, well, wait a minute, I should be able to sit down and eat a meal without sitting here and thinking, how much does this thing cost? Or me sitting here and thinking, why should I be eating junk food again? Back at McDonald's, and I should be eating something, I should be having a seaweed burger. As I said, I picked out sex because it gets most people's attention, but you could. You could, attempting to do something new with your own intellect or your own processes, and somewhere along the line you could have gone, wait a minute, because people have done this. There's an institutional history of this under all kinds of names, that you should be, in times past we call living for the moment, or you should hold your attention right here if you're going to sit down and have a Big Mac. Then do not sit there and eat the Big Mac and bitch at McDonald's. Don't sit there and eat the Big Mac, and while you're doing it, even to yourself, that nobody else is there, and you're sitting there thinking, God, is this thing greasy? They're always greasy. Or boy, do they overcharge. Now, there's a history. This is not an individual phenomenon. You should know. You people are well read enough. There's a history. Zen is one way that it comes out, just to give you some. But you've heard this somewhere. You read it. There is a history on a small level, institutional in life, of them saying, not just sexually, not just that do away with it. You shouldn't be imagining that you're in bed with somebody else when you're in bed with this person. But it is like you should hold your attention to whatever you're doing. That if you're going to sit there and badmouth a Big Mac, don't eat a Big Mac. In other words, deal with the acts of what you're doing. Except for this, friends and neighbors. Do you not find it interesting that every man and woman who puts on their pants and knickers on this planet does exactly that? That you have to deal in the acts, and I say must, as enjoyable as they may be, of eating when hungry, sleeping when tired, getting warm when cold. But that's not all you do. You also think. There's also the factual world going on, and it may or may not have any immediate apparent correlation to what you're doing, but oftentimes it does, and oftentimes people have noticed it, and oftentimes people have said, oh, nay, something is amiss here. Can you see that it is, from that view, that it is quite, or could be instructive and useful to realize and to look upon the factual world, that part of its job is, that part of its responsibility is to make the sameness, to make, in a sense, the drabness of the actual world more exciting. All right, in other words, could you see, to show you that we have not changed the subject, could you see that it could be part of the responsibility here, in the area we're talking about, for facts to sound better, always to sound better than they actually are. That is part of their method of fulfilling their purpose of making, of kind of jazzing up acts. That part of the way they kind of brighten it up is by sounding better than they actually are. Because, what does this do? All right, I'll tell you. Because by facts continually sounding better than they actually seem to turn out to be, it makes men continue to try and fix them. To change them, to repair them. The first time, I don't know this, but the first time Mahler heard the Spuggen song, he might have went, on mein Gott. Or caramba, huh? But, the first time Picasso tried to do a cubist, or Braque tried to make a candy bar. No, he tried to paint a cubist. At any rate, the first time they might have gone, uh-oh, boy, I hope nobody saw this. I'll be laughed out of Paris. And so they keep fooling around until what? Well, until they fool around some more. If you followed up to where I just did the last couple of minutes, you could have, if you were ordinary, even tried to play this impossible game again verbally. If you'd been ordinary and then tried to listen to some of this, you'd go going, well, all of what you say is true. I never thought about it that way. that even if your examples are a little skewed, if not exaggerated, you are right throughout all the time in life. An ordinary person could pick out all kinds of cheaper shots than I did. Of course, when they picked them out, they'd really be cheap shots because they would be doing it mechanically, and they would have a vested interest. They could start saying, well, politically correct thinking, the hot subject now. An ordinary person can say, well, I know what you're talking about. It sounds at first like a great idea, but it turns into insanity. It turns into doing just what it's accusing others of doing. Is Captain Iron in the house? Is Captain... What else they expect? But at any rate, they can say, you're right, you're right. There are certain ideas that humans come up with, those dumb mothers. Stupid people, they come up with these ideas that sound like it's a great idea. Welfare, war on poverty. And it ends up, they don't help the poor people. I'll tell you what they did. They set up a whole new bureaucracy, and there were people up there, relatives of the king, up there making $80,000 a year doing nothing. And those who were classified as being at the poverty level during when the program was in its heyday, not one person ever got 1/10 that. Huh? Do you see what I'm saying? Captain Irony, please call home. It's not that. It's not one example. It's not Mahler. It's not the war on poverty. What I'm asking you to consider now is, what if that is inescapably one of the reasons of the factual world is for it, and it's not a conspiracy, I hate to tell you, because you do it too. So you're part of the conspiracy and don't know it, which makes you, God, you're stupid with a capital S, or dumb with a capital, whatever dumb starts with. That it's part of the job of facts to sound better. Not any particular one, not anything we pick out, not just in music or art or politics, but that the more functional, the more useful it's going to be for some area, for some period of time, is for the fact to actually sound, to promise more than it can ever deliver. And there's nothing wrong. That's part of the job of it. Because then, let's say you hear about it, which you're ordinary, that's all you ever know is what you hear about. A great quote, a great new idea. I was about to think of that, yeah. But anyway, you hear this great idea. You go, wait, where did I join in? How can I get in the parade? Hey, I love this. By the time it gets going for a while, you or somebody else, probably somebody else says, this is not working out. You think, I was about to say that, yeah. And you think, boy, something went wrong. So you think, wait a minute, let's split off. We'll become the orthodoxy. We'll become the liberal wing of this. They don't have it right. And so you split off. In other words, the factual world is it says, well, let's do this. Not change the actual world. They say that, but we're not talking about it. We know better, right? It's not a matter of changing it, but they say they are. Well, they're going to do this. And it may or may not, apparently, be directed toward more basic human needs, such as the war on poverty. It can be that, which is getting close to hunger, a real primary need, or it could be in art. Let's do something about, let's take away the government funding for art that is offensive. In other words, it can be almost to the primary level, the actual world, or it can be into the factual world. But at any rate, the ideas, the factual ideas continually come out. But what if part of the job is? It's not that there's nothing wrong that they do not work. The part of the job is for them to always promise more than they can ever deliver. That they have got to sound better than they actually are. Or else they would be suicidal. And so by sounding better that you hear an idea, boy, I like that. A new factual, God, now I got a reason to live. I'm going to join up. I'll spend my own money to do this. And you get in the middle of it, and it's just not working out. Surprise, a-fruckin' surprise. But assuming that you're ordinary and you are wired up to be interested in this, rather than just turn your back on it, you think, wait a minute. What's needed here is some RA. No, not that. Remedial action. And so you will start, you'll say, well, look, let's reform this. Let's straighten this out. The facts, that is, the ideas, were good. And you'll find a few more of the people. Maybe they'll say, I agree. But something got off. We got off the track. Come on, let's work on it, gang. All right, let's do. You don't see efficiency? Forget a damn diesel engine or solar-powered cars. You got solar-powered brains and humans. We're out of time. So much for that. Well, I had an idea. I thought if we